Don't know about you, but the name Aircross sounds like something that you'd use for a pair of trainers maybe, or a mattress. For Citroen though, it signifies an SUV. Yeah, we know, it's a bit weird, but there you go. And this, the C5 Aircross, is the larger of Citroen's two SUV offerings. In this review, we're going to look at how comfortable, practical and economical a C5 is, and why it looks like an off-roader, but it isn't an off-roader at all, and why the name Aircross isn't so daft after all. While the smaller C3 Aircross is a rival for the likes of the Ford Puma or Vauxhall Mocha, the C5 Aircross is a much larger car. At 4.5 metres, it's about as long as a Ford Focus or a Volkswagen Golf. And if you're thinking about buying a C5 Aircross, then you might also be thinking about buying any number of family-sized SUVs, including the popular Nissan Qashqai, Volkswagen Tiguan or Peugeot 5008. In fact, because Peugeot and Citroen are owned by the same parent company, the C5 and the 5008 share a lot in common. The engine, the gearbox and various other bits and bobs. In fact, if you're used to Peugeots, you'll recognise some of this switchgear, in particular the gear lever. The infotainment system is, okay, I suppose. As with other parts of this car, it's based on a Peugeot system, but it's not all that easy to find your way around and the touchscreen can be a bit laggy at times. At least all models come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which you can see here. And you can also see just how much time I allocate to responding to text messages and telephone calls. And the great thing about this setup is that you can use Google Maps, the map that's on your phone, or even Waze. And if you're looking at Feel trim, which is the entry-level model, you'll have to because there's no built-in sat-nav. All trim levels do get a futuristic-looking digital driver's display instead of an old-fashioned speedo and rev counter, though. Very jazzy. Also pleasingly jazzy is the rest of the interior. In fact, Citroens have got a long tradition of doing things slightly differently.
What?
You've got these funky, chunky air vents and lots of rounded-off squares. It's all appealingly unusual, especially when some rivals end up smothering you with too much shiny bling. We're looking at you, Mercedes GLA, or just come across a bit, well, dull. Own up, Skoda Karoq. It's worth noting now that this is a slightly earlier car. From 2022 onwards, you get a larger infotainment screen. However, it does rob the dash of a little bit of its character. You don't get these cute little air vents, for example. There's also this large central storage space, which is useful because it makes up for a glove box that's tiny due to the fact that the fuse box is situated here, which is fine for left-hand drive cars, but not so great for us. The seats, meanwhile, are clearly trying to be squidgy and comfortable and succeeding, rather than doing a hip-hugging impression of a racing car seat. And thoughts of racing cars, quite understandably so, will be far from your mind when sitting in the back seats of the C5. Your children and any other passengers you have sitting in the back will be very happy with the amount of legroom and headroom. And there are 3 separate seats which both go forwards and backwards individually, and they also recline, so you can have a little rest. In the boot, you'll mostly find, well, lots of room, which is a good thing for a boot, we reckon. If you're interested in numbers, we're talking 580 litres with the seats as far back as they'll go, 720 with them forward, and 1,630 litres with the seats fully folded. That's bigger than pretty much every other 5-seater SUV in its class, which is a bit of a problem actually, because the related 5008 has a 7-seater option, and if you regularly need to transport more than 5 people, it might be worth looking at that or a Kia Sorento or a Skoda Kodiaq. Some versions of those models have 4-wheel drive, so if that's something that you want, perhaps take a look at those. This is strictly front-wheel drive only, but we think that's a good thing because it means there's more space in the boot, and front-wheel drive over 4-wheel drive is more fuel efficient. Not only that, most supermarket car parks tend to be tarmac, not fields. Out on the road, the C5 Aircross is comfortable and relaxing. With finger-light steering responses, the steering wheel is really easy to turn, and soft cushioning suspension. So although the C5 Aircross doesn't have actual air suspension like Citroens of old, it does feel like you're riding on air, which is rather lovely, apart from if you're in a rush. And then expect a lot of body lean in the corners and maybe some car-sick passengers. Engines include a 130 horsepower 1.2 litre turbocharged petrol, a 180 horsepower 1.6 turbocharged petrol and a couple of diesel options, and in post-facelift models a plug-in hybrid option. So should you buy a Citroen C5 Aircross? That's a tricky one. It doesn't try to be overtly sporty. It's not over-the-top macho in its styling. Heck, it's not even an off-roader. But what it does do well is spacious, comfortable family transport. And for that reason, it makes a very good choice.